What is up, everyone? This is Samantha Praviti, your host of the Fantasy Flex podcast. I am joined, as always, by Mike Triplett, longtime Saints beat writer, whose work you can find on the Action Network and New Orleans Football. Mike, how was your weekend?
Pretty good. I actually got to watch football since the Saints played on Thursday night. So I felt like I'm more researched than ever before, even though I was joking with you before we went on the air. You have your free Kyle Pitts sign. Oh man, my hopes for Kyle Pitts. I keep putting him out there, and I actually watched them throw to him twice in the red zone and actually complete a pass to him from the 1 yard line that was still short of the goal line somehow. So frustrating.
I am so out on this Falcons team. I mean, sometimes they show hints of life. It's kind of like how Matt Ryan was like the QB2 last week. And then, of course, he turns back into a pumpkin the next week. Well, that kind of happened with Kyle Pitts. He is back into a pumpkin, back into fantasy jail. I don't know if it's the Falcons. I mean, obviously, Marcus Mariota completing 8 passes in a single game where they were trailing by double digits for like the whole game is totally unacceptable to me. But I know that there were also misses too on his part. So there's combined guilt here, combined blame.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Matt Ryan obviously turned into more than a pumpkin. I'm sure that's going to be one of the lead news items this week.
Yeah, well, I guess we can just jump right into some of the news and storylines from things that happened this Sunday and this past week. So we do have the news that Matt Ryan is ostensibly benched for the rest of the season. Like, I did see that he has a shoulder injury, a separated shoulder, but it sounds like they are going to roll with Sam Ehlinger for the rest of the season at quarterback. So I don't have any really good frame of reference for Ehlinger. I believe he was a 7th round pick from last year's draft. So not a lot to go on. This will be his first NFL start. Do you have any hope for the Colts receivers at this point?
No, well, I think it's really unfortunate for them because the one thing Matt Ryan was doing was throwing frequently.
Yes.
It wasn't very effective for Indianapolis, but I looked this up, but just before we went on, Matt Ryan is tied for the NFL lead right now in completions this year, but he's 29th in yards per completion. So all he was doing was throwing a short pass right away to stay out of trouble because that offensive line's been horrible.
Right.
But that's why we were getting these numbers we were getting. That's why we're going to be talking about Paris Campbell as a possible wide receiver pickup. And it's hard to believe that Sam Ehlinger is going to help in that regard. I think he's a more mobile quarterback and probably help the Colts offense that he can escape trouble and maybe keep plays alive longer. Maybe that'll make more downfield throws possible. Maybe that'll help Pittman. Maybe that'll help Alec Pierce. But I think the volume is going to go way down. I think, and just his inexperience alone, and the fact that we can't trust anything in this offense the way their offensive line is playing, I don't think this is necessarily a positive sign for the good players on the offense.
Yeah, I was trying to find a silver lining here. At least maybe it could help the running backs, or maybe Nyheim Hines with dump off type passes, or Paris Campbell even like in a PPR type format, but it doesn't look great for me. So it doesn't look great for the Colts in general. But on to a different set of running backs. So my Carolina Panthers are really messing up this tanking thing. They've got it all backwards, do they not? Because they're in the middle of this fire sale, which they say is not a fire sale, but whatever. They got rid of Robbie Anderson. They have now traded Christian McCaffrey, RIP. I'm still very much mourning that, but it's on to 2023 for us. But then they do that and they go out there and just absolutely trounce the Buccaneers, which I definitely did not have on my bingo card. I'm sure that blew up a whole bunch of people's parlays.
Well, I know from hearing the Saints talk optimistically about trying to salvage their season at 2-5, the 2-5 is only 1 game out of the division lead right now. So and yes, it does count as a fire sale. One of the few situations where they only had to trade one player to declare it a fire sale, and they traded the one guy that makes it an official fire sale. But yeah, I mean, I'm not overly optimistic about the Panthers running backs because even though both Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Foreman had big games, I don't think either one of us expect the game scripts to look like that going forward, to be protecting 21-3 leads. Even though Deontay Foreman ended up with the bigger numbers, I'm actually a little bit more intrigued by Chuba Hubbard there for a few reasons. He actually started and was getting more snaps before he went out with an injury that they said was minor. So if he played the whole game, maybe he would have ended up with the better numbers, but he's clearly the better pass catcher. And I think we think Carolina will use their running backs to catch passes more often than just running the ball consistently and controlling the game. And he's the young one that they want to look to for the future. So Deontay Foreman is not going to go away. I would lean a little toward Chuba Hubbard, but I think it's overall a little disturbing how much they split time. Here we go. They get rid of Christian McCaffrey and we just wind up inheriting another timeshare in a backfield.
Yeah, another timeshare in a backfield in an offense that is not exciting, a PJ Walker wielded offense. So it is hard to get excited about a lot of players on this team, save DJ Moore, who actually had a nice game. So
welcome back. I like seeing that.
Good for him. I know that there were some angry managers out there on the fantasy Twitter space that were saying that they sat Moore for the first time all season. Of course, it works out that way.
I sat him for Brandon Cooks. So.
Oof. Okay. Well, actually, speaking of Brandon Cooks, there are a potential number of other, maybe not fire sales, but potential movers and shakers at this trade deadline, which is quickly approaching. We've got Cam Akers, who is in some kind of philosophical thing with Sean McVay. Elijah Moore, year 2 receiver, who's already out on the Jets. I'm actually pretty surprised. I thought that was kind of brazen. We got Melvin Gordon, who was not happy with his usage a couple weeks ago. He ended up being used a little bit more this week. Kareem Hunt, who is maybe on the trading block. They're taking calls for him in Cleveland. Jerry Jeudy's getting some calls. Brandon Cooks, like I said. Are there any ones that you're really interested in, especially if they could, like, the change in team could make a big impact for fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, situation would be huge. I could be wrong about this, so I don't want to just go with my Twitter hearsay or whatever, but I believe there was a report that Cam Akers was liking that Melvin Gordon was liking a post.
Yes.
That someone said, trade him for Cam Akers straight up. Who says no? And I thought, yeah, that would be really good for both guys, wouldn't it? I mean, because I would like either Cam Akers or Melvin Gordon if they were clearly a featured back in a situation. I would like whoever the Denver back is if they went with one and stuck with one. So I'm a little intrigued. If Kareem Hunt ended up in Denver, that would be, that would feel exciting. But the problem is, with all those running backs, it obviously depends on situation. Any one of those guys needs to be the one who's leading a timeshare by themselves. I was actually a little encouraged that Melvin Gordon got as much work as he did, but my first thought was, are they just showcasing him so they can trade him now?
Right. I mean, hey, Christian McCaffrey had that great game last couple weeks ago, and I was thinking, oh God, like that's totally they're showcasing him, they're trading him, and that you could be onto something there. But to your point, yes, I think that it would be interesting to see them swap. Kareem Hunt in Denver would be super interesting, as well as Kareem Hunt in Los Angeles, possibly, but neither of those teams have a lot of draft capital. So I don't know if they're going to make moves, especially not being super contenders at this point. So we shall see how that all shakes out. We also have maybe a quarterback situation in New Orleans. And as our New Orleans expert, I'd love to hear from you, because watching this, I mean, look, Andy Dalton is currently the QB2 behind Joe Burrow this week. I mean, I get it. It's not like the prettiest QB2 stat line, but it gets the job done for fantasy. So I would like to know what your take is on this, if we're going to see Jameis Winston next week, or if it's going to be Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I think the Saints have a real dilemma on their hands, Samantha, because I think it's time for Jameis to come back. I'm medically, I don't know for sure, but he has been working his way back, all the way to where he was the number 2 quarterback in this last game. He says he's feeling a lot better. So I think it becomes a performance decision now that they've had this sort of they're in the middle of a 10-day break between games. And it's really tough because Andy Dalton has done a lot of really good things with this offense. It's looked like the offense they want to have: run game first, short, efficient passes second. But then Andy Dalton goes out with a chance to maybe cement it, and he does all the things that everyone's always accused Jameis Winston of doing wrong. 3 interceptions in the first half, one of them in the end zone, 2 pick sixes after the 2-minute warning, which was just, I mean, it derailed the game. It sort of derailed the whole season. It was not completely his fault, especially the one that bounced off the receiver's hands. But still, it's tough to look Jameis Winston in the eye and say, we're not giving you your starting job back. We're sticking with the guy who just had 3 interceptions in the first half the other night. But I think there's a real dilemma because the Saints actually over the last 3 weeks lead the NFL in points scored. So they do like a lot of things they've been doing with their offense. The question is, do they think they can sustain those offensive games while going back to Jameis Winston? I'll be really curious to see. I think what we see in practice on Wednesday might be the answer. I mean, I think they're going to have, Dennis Allen just said today, they're going to have those discussions over the next couple of days. I think they want to know going into the week who they're going with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with a couple teams on bye, we've got the Raiders coming up next week, which I think could make either one of them a potentially viable streamer. But we can talk about that a little bit later. And
it would definitely help if they get Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry or
I was
both
just going to say
back in the near future, which is also something I'm very excited to see on the field Wednesday, because boy, oh boy, does this team need some bodies back, especially in the secondary, but also at receiver.
Yeah, and I was just going to say to your point about them actually scoring a lot of points and being a very confident offense, they're doing all of that without 2 of their best receivers. So, I mean, Chris Olave has looked amazing, but even a couple games ago, they didn't have anyone. So, and they still, put up a lot of points. So it's been it's an interesting dynamic that I want to see unfold. On the injury front, unfortunately, last week was pretty light, and this week it came roaring back, the wave of injuries. So Breece Hall probably being the biggest one. He was a standout rookie, having an amazing season, of course, and he is now out for the year with a torn ACL and meniscus damage. So hopefully he comes back next year full strength. That obviously elevates Michael Carter to potentially within striking distance of, RB1 status in the right matchups. Because the Jets are actually looking pretty good. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but
that's everything we want that we haven't, the other situations haven't presented. A good team that might actually be protecting some leads with one running back who looks like he'll lead a timeshare, who both runs and catches. Sign me up for Michael Carter if he's available in one of my leagues.
Absolutely. We also got DK Metcalf. I felt really bad because there were a lot of people making fun of him getting taken off the field because of that time that he got taken off the field just to use the bathroom. Unfortunately, it was an actual injury, though it sounds less serious than I think people thought initially. He is week to week with his patellar tendon issue. Sounds like he wants to play this week. Who knows if that'll actually happen, but it sounds like it's better news. Pour one out though for the fantasy team that I have Breece Hall and DK Metcalf on. So in the matter of minutes, I was like, my whole season is just out the window. So certainly disappointing there. We've also got David Njoku with a high ankle sprain, Mike Williams with a high ankle sprain as well, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who left that game very early to the dismay of many fantasy managers who started him. And he's in the concussion protocol, which I think a lot of people have this expectation of players returning pretty quickly. And that's just not been happening as much with the changed protocol. So he could definitely miss next week. Any of those kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right about that. That's the same thing I was thinking is you need to monitor that. And even though they say they're encouraged, I think there was already a report that he's on the mend. I mean, I just know this from Chris Olave last week. He passed sort of every test and returned to practice fully on Friday, and they still held him out, which, it's nice to see those precautions, but it's important to keep in mind that teams are taking this seriously right now.